Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Spring was early that year. It was only March. Out for a walk. And there was no snow. It's an unusual sight for these parts. Normal. As they say, the monkeys' choppers are in full swing. But here there are puddles all around. Even the grass is peeking out. Soon the migratory birds, as if smelling the warmth, stretched out. The kites are already circling. The old men said, looking at the soaring predators in the sky. So the earthlings will be reborn. And then they talked about how everything is changing rapidly in the world and global warming is to blame. I don't know what the hell that is. Well, if the bird's flying home early, then the scientists are right. Something is changing in nature. And it's not a good thing. Old people in general like to talk to the point of creepiness. But young people have no time to listen. They've got work to do. In Little Moose Creek, after a winter's stagnation, life is stirring. Busy, as it is in the springtime in the village. Andrew had been back in the village for 6 months. He didn't like the noisy, stuffy city. He needs a lot of money, but where can he get it? He didn't earn much at the workshop, and what he got, he spent on food and lodging, and he wanted to go home. Especially his old, sick mother. He left her with a heavy heart. How would she be without him? And then his mother got the happy news that they had a farmer. Abandoned farm buildings for repairing machinery. What kind of machinery did he bring? It looks like a field, but in spring he's going to start men. He's looking for workers. Maybe you'll come back, son. You're an excellent mechanic. Your father taught you. Then you got your certificates. Obviously, you'll be in good standing here. Betty asked him shyly. I'll think about it. Mamo, Andrew promised. To be honest, he wanted to scream. Yeah, sure. Only there was one thing but Jenna, his love. That's what kept him in town. He met Jenna not too long ago. It was still the bouquet period. How would he leave her? Jenna worked as a waitress in a cafe not far from the auto repair shop where Andrew worked. The lovers walked home from work together every night. First, Andrew would walk Jenna to her apartment, where she rented a room from a mean old woman, and then stomped to her dormitory. Easy conversations, jokes, kisses. It was all so sweet, but Andrew had it in his head to go back to Moose Creek. So one fall evening, he asked Jenna point blank if she'd go back to the village with me. I would, Jenna replied without hesitation. Andrew was a little confused and then rejoiced. So he was not mistaken in his choice. Girls love roses to the end of the world to follow him according to follow. Jenna really loved Andrew very much and was so afraid that suddenly he would disappear. But the countryside didn't scare her. She'd grown up there. True, at 16 she had to leave her native village after her mother. There remained only stepfather, who drank ungodly and drunk, tried to molest the poor girl. Here Jenna and ran away to the mountains, was able to enter the neck. Even got a place in the dormitory. But only after graduation she was released into free floating. And where to? In the city at a large sewing enterprise could get a job, but it was a shame. Jenna herself didn't want to go to the underground seamstresses. She knew it was akin to slavery. So she decided to take a job in a cafe. It didn't pay $1 million, but at least she had a good meal. The cooks could sometimes share products that weren't liquid. They fed the poor orphan. Jenna worked there first as a dishwasher, and then she was promoted. The girls got her, and she became a waitress. Jenna lived with an old lady near the cafe. Half of her earnings went to pay for a stuffy room that looked more like a doghouse. But Jenna believed that one day things would change in her life. And that's what happened when she met Andrew. Life had taken on new colors with him. She was now ready to go to the end of the world. Moose Creek is Moose Creek. Betty was surprised to see her son with a girl. Even though Andrew had hinted that he was not coming alone, his mother didn't understand him. She thought he was coming with a friend who had decided to settle in the village. And here you are with a bride, so nice and friendly and respectful. From the first acquaintance, Betty Jenna began to call her daughter. The girl at first blushed at this was lost. After all, she had a mom was the only one, and here is some stranger woman. But soon she fell in love with Betty, and exactly like a daughter and became, and she called her only mom. In February, they got married, The three of them began to live together, and it was good for them. Andrew and Jenna only wondered why they clung to this town. Real life. Here it is in the steppe land of rare flights. Even in the South, rumors were happy. It's not like the endless noise of city streets. How fresh is the air? You could eat it with a spoon. So the mayor came, and the child was called to work at the club. It was the only cultural place in the village that hadn't been closed, except for a small store. The school was on lockdown for about 10 years. The nurse's station was also dead. But the club kept the village going. Old people are the majority. What entertainment for them? Do they even go to the club on holidays? Everyone communicates with each other, and the cultural workers with the kids will make a holiday for them. There were 10 kids in the village, by the way, and it's decent for their village. In the morning, they would run to the car that would take them to school in the neighboring village. And in the evening, returning, they hurried to the club, where they learned new dances, poems, and songs. I used to practice with them, but I couldn't. Her son took her to the city. Oh, how worried we got then. People said the club would close. And then someone remembered the zipper. You heard her sing at her own wedding. And Jenna sang really well. Talk to her. Then they told the district bosses that they had a ready-made employee. They gave the go-ahead. For those pennies that paid the artistic director, it was easier to hire a worker than the club. Even if you close it, you still need to keep an eye on the building. So let the artistic director keep an eye on it. Jenna happily agreed. She had performed in her village as a child. That the money is small, no problem. She has her own vegetable garden. A good husband can handle it. Betty was happy too. She was an important person. She was the cultural worker in her village. And Andrew didn't mind. Why sit around pots and pans all day? Let her work if she wants to. And he himself got a job with that very farmer. Peter was very pleased with a smart guy in his farm. Doesn't drink, knows about machinery. Not a man, but gold. He gave Andrew his best tractor right away, some kind of foreign tractor. It even has air conditioning in the cab. In general, you can work all you want. Andrew was honored by such trust. And he also enjoyed the authority of the other mechanizers, who, seeing that the guy does not know about machinery, all tried to ask him on business and without. Andrew helped, repaired, gave advice. He was ready to help. Yeah, spring is friendly. March flew by. Didn't see it coming. April was already counting down. The snow is gone, there's no rain. The sun comes, and the earth dries up. It needs attention. Before the men knew it, it was time to go to the field. The land had been resting for several years, and there was a lot of work to be done with it. But they knew their business, Andrew among them. He would go to the field in the morning and come back tired and grimy till night. Jenna was still laughing. The Murmansk tractor doesn't save the dust from the dust. Andrew in defense of his iron horse. They say he is good. Only one of his comrades' engine stalls, or the other one's engine sparks, so I have to help, and you have to crawl under the tractor and climb on top of it. It's a lot of things. What can you do? If the owner had enough money for only one decent tractor, it's okay, he's rich, he'll get more equipment. The main thing is that they get decent wages. With such forces, they'll soon clean up all the fields. Soon the wheat will fall into the ground. There will be a new life, and with it new hopes for a better future. That morning, Jenna was the first to wake up to a strange alarm. As if someone had tugged on her shoulder. Eyes opened, Andrew, peacefully beside her, reports Valley's mom in her room sunnily working. Jenna's side chased away any anxiety. Pressed her cheek against her husband's. What family? A wave of tenderness swept over her. How happy she was that life had brought her and Andrew together for a lifetime. Jenna carefully kissed her husband on the warm tip of his nose. Sleeping and knowing nothing. The young woman smiled. Yes, she would be sure to tell him today. Jenna clung tighter to her husband and straight silenced with pleasure, imagining her husband's joy. Yes, they are going to have a baby boy. That's for sure. Jenna had been to the district clinic yesterday morning, and they confirmed everything. Andrew came back late from the field. I decided to cheer him up in the morning. Andrew opened his eyes, smiled at Jenna. You're awake already? What are you doing up so early? Sleep, baby. He killed his wife, and in his arms, she sang sweetly. Immersing himself in a pleasant rhyme, Andrew quietly got up and went to the kitchen. On the table, Jenna cooked from the evening, and under a white towel his breakfast, his favorite cheesecakes, was waiting for him. The kettle rumbled, and Jenna jumped up at the sound of it. Almost overslept, sending her husband out into the field. No, he always packs his bag of groceries, also prepared from the night before, and runs to the fur yard. He doesn't want to wake his wife. He won't realize that she's happy to see him off. And today, he has to tell her the most important thing. Andrew will find out, and all day long he will work happily. Jenna just got out of bed, as suddenly heard light discord in the yard male voices. The young woman anxiously looked out the window and aghast. The barely escaping dawn was covered by a milky white mist. Or was it smoke? Jenna even thought she smelled smoke. Toward the house through the yard were walking quickly Peter and Sam, one of the mechanics. Andrew had also heard the early guests and was already hurrying outside. They talked about something on the porch, and Andrew returned to the house and began to hurriedly pack. "What is it?" asked Jenna anxiously, glancing up from the bedroom. "The field's burning at Wendy's," Andrew answered quickly. "The fire is still far away from us, but there is such a wind that the field is about to be snatched away. There are still young and birch nooks, and if it spreads on the bears, then the whole bird will burn only to see the nest, and at least to repel. Medvedev, it was a very beautiful lake, and the local Finns loved it for fish abundance, for bird diversity. There were swans and geese there, and no ducks at all." Jenna gasped as she imagined the trouble the fire could cause. "Come on, boy," Andrew smiled affectionately. "Don't be scared in no time. We'll beat this fire." "Where did it come from?" "Men say it came from the neighboring region. Hunters probably scorching the grass, raising birds like that. Damn the bastards. Andrew, be careful out there, will you?" I heard the voice of Betty, who also woke up and hurried to come out to her son. "Didn't your hero cause much of a fire?" "We did." "Yes, until she gets there with annoyance." Andrew waved his hand and then smiled. "Okay, my favorite girls, I'm off." "Take care," whispered Jenna, Betty, and crossed to her son's back. Jenna stood on the doorstep and watched as a brisk stride. Andrew headed with the men to the fur yard, and some kind of anxiety clenched her heart painfully. Or maybe it's because I just didn't tell Andreyusha about the most important thing. Well, nothing. He'll come home, then he'll know. Jenna returned to the house. Not even had time to drink tea. With annoyance, she noted, going into the kitchen. How can he be hungry? He's always been like that. Betty sighed. Whenever something happens, he'd run to help. Well, God willing, he'll be done in an hour. Maybe Peter will let them rest. Even though the sewing season goes on every day, both women were silent, and each had a strange anxiety in her heart. It was like a cobweb knotting from within, and the smoke was already stinking so clearly that it became hard to breathe. Stepfire approached by that time already to the nearest from the village nail forbidden branches from the edge of the forest was sick thick cushion from behind the fallen leaves of birds that had already sat on the nests. Lurking they will die, but their offspring will not abandon. Others of their kin were scurrying over the forest with a desperate cry, and it was frightening. Pain and terror could be heard in their polyphony. The men rushed to put out the fire, using shovels and pitchforks and rags. Soon a barrel of water was brought up, and things went faster. Andrew on his tractor plowed through the forest. The field, from which to the village, was a hand's throw away. And it seemed that soon everyone exhaled. The fire was quieting down. Suddenly the men, as one in horror, cried out from the field to the very lake that bears are called. A column of fire rushed up. Apparently, the fire crawled along the grass like a snake, and then with the flow of wind it gained strength and rose. A little more, and it will spread to the reeds, and there it will be a bad thing. The whole lake will go up in flames. There are so many reeds there, and there is also a bird sitting in it, and it will definitely not rise from the nest. Everyone will die. Andrew, seeing such a disaster at full speed, rushed to block the way to the fire to plow the lane. The men were fighting the fire and cursing the firemen. Where are they all? Why does not come to the rescue? And only when they had crushed the fire, they pushed it away from the lake. The long-awaited sound of sirens was heard. The firemen finished the men's work. They made protocols and reports and left. In the meantime, the men had recovered a little. That was their morning workout. But the lakes were saved and the forest was almost completely preserved. Of course, we still have to keep an eye out. But the main job is still done. The men thought that Peter would let them go home to rest, change clothes, have a snack. They were sitting at the edge of the woods, talking about what had happened. But the farmer had a different idea. He came over and immediately gave a command. Moisture addition should be finished on the far field. Enough of Russia's life for work. Men. Some of the workers earned, and at least a couple of hours to recover. But the owner stood his ground and the land is drying up. We have to do everything in time. And those who don't like it are free to go. But they can't wait for calculations. Come on, men. Andrew was the first to get up and headed for his tractor. Why are we stalling for time? Let's start sooner we finish. And the others got up. No one wanted to lose their bread. The field was just huge. They worked together. But still they had already finished when the sun was rolling towards the sunset. Everyone was tired beyond belief. Andrew too. He returned home on his tractor. His eyes were closing. He was exhausted. He was driving along an old dirt road that led along the forest to the village, which was rarely traveled by anyone, and how he did not notice it. There's a small rusty piece of pipe just squeezed out of the ground after the winter. Where did it come from? No one will say. Now it's just tired. Andrew. Very. And the tractor was driving home, hurrying to his beloved wife with a tasty dinner that his mother had prepared. At full speed, he ran into this piece of iron. Tractor hit an obstacle, jerked sideways. There was a steep slope. In a matter of seconds, the tractor suddenly slid sideways and then tumbled off the road. Everything happened in front of the bench, who was driving behind Andrew. Chuck jumped out of his tractor, ran to save his friend. The tractor's lying on its side. And inside Andrew is strong. He ears and splinters on the glass. And the blood just keeps coming out. He's unconscious and other men came up. They pulled Andrew out, and he was unconscious. And the first thing he did was to look at the tractor, gritting his teeth. When he saw what had happened to his handsome boy, then he looked at the worker. Peter shouted to him, "Chuck Andrew to the hospital urgently, because he'll bleed to death. Bring your Jeep. We'll put him on the back seat." "Why the Jeep?" Unexpectedly cold, the owner replied. "Call an ambulance." "Yeah, Andrew will be dead by the time it gets here," screamed the men. "He's not bleeding. He'll smear it all over the cabin," Peter muttered. "You'll clean it up later." They wrecked the tractor. "Now you want to tamper with my car too." From such words, the men were confused, but soon came to their senses. They grumbled. Chuck even attacked the owner with his fists. Yes, they held him back. Peter jumped into his Jeep, shouted that he called an ambulance and drove away. The ambulance didn't come for a long time, and Andrew didn't regain consciousness. Did you think his comrades would take him on a tractor? But shaking on the road would only make things worse. Finally, they heard the sound of a distant siren. They breathed a sigh of relief. Andrew will be saved. What happened to Andrew? Jenna found out from Fame. He came running like a madman and told everything darkened in the eyes of the young wife's legs went under. Chuck could barely catch her. "What are you doing?" He coaxed, frightened. "Everything will be fine. You'll see." The doctor from the ambulance said that the transfusion will be done and stitched where necessary. "How's the new guy gonna be?" "I have to go to him," Jenna whispered. "I should be there." "Where are you going now?" "It's nighttime." "Rest, go to Aunt Vali, and don't say anything yet. She's weak at heart." Jenna sighed heavily. "My mother-in-law might have a stroke from such news." "I can't help but say it when she's got it written all over her face." But she didn't have to say anything. From the corridor and heard a creak, and then the sound of a falling body threw serially with glory into the house. And there Betty lay. She heard her daughter-in-law talking to her son's friend. Jenna brought to her senses. The mother-in-law took her into the room. And then the two of them sat together, silent. They thought of one thing, only if Andrew got well. Late at night, I watched Jenna's dream. Barely got to bed. And she had a strange dream, as if she was running through a field, and around her there was fog or smoke calling Andrew. But he didn't answer. Then the smoke cleared in one place. Jenna sees her. Her Andrew is sitting on a hill entangling a fishing net. Looks at her and says, "Shoot him down. We want to catch fish." Jenna wonders how with Bagya, because he died a long time ago, Andrew. Andrew suddenly frowned and waved his hand, saying, "Go away, cold and aloof," as if he was not with her. Jenna woke up from the pounding of her own heart. Outside the window, the dawn was already glimmering with a restless dog. Anxiety did not leave Jenna. She looked at the phone on the fumes to call the hospital, or it was too early laughed after all. Dialed the number for the surgical department of the neighborhood hospital. Good thing she had still found it in the directory yesterday. It's only the 6th hour. Why are you calling so early? She heard a disgruntled female voice in the receiver. Sorry, Jenna Trolls didn't know how Andrew was doing. He was brought to you last night after the accident. The voice in the phone went silent. Can you hear me? Hello, said Jenna in a louder voice. Girl, call after 9 when the doctors come. Already without a shadow of discontent, replied the interlocutor. Okay, I'll call. You just tell me he came to his senses, nothing, and did not answer. The phone rang with short beeps. Betty peeked into the room that night. She'd really stuck it out and aged even more. What is the daughter saying? She asked quietly. They say Jenna played fine. The doctors will say more after 9 o'clock. They're the main ones. Betty exhaled and crossed herself. Alive. Repeated Jenna, dead man with white lips. In half an hour, she was already hurrying to the bus stop. Jenna decided to go to the hospital after all. She had to talk to the doctors. And maybe she would be able to see her husband? The bus stop was 2 kilometers outside the village on the highway. That's when the district authorities decided, and now, in any bad weather, the few residents of Moose Creek had to travel almost 2 kilometers to get to the district center. Fortunately, it was warm that May morning. Spring. Nature was fragrant and happy. The morning sun seemed to smile and generously gave its warmth. Jenna's heart felt warmer too. The anxiety had subsided a little. For some reason, she decided that everything would be all right. Already not far from Jenna's bus stop, the other day, Peter's Jeep looked out the window and offered her a ride. To the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm going to Andrew's. Come on, get in. I'm going downtown on business too. Jenna wanted to refuse at first. I mean, she'd heard how the farmer behaved yesterday. But then she decided that maybe he had realized everything. He would get there comfortably, and that was the main thing. In her situation, she should take care of herself. The bus is so bumpy on the way. Peter asked about Andrew, about Betty. And then, in the district center near the hospital, he suddenly said, Jenna, let Andrew get better. He's made a mess of things. Now he's going to have the tractor on his conscience. What do you mean? Jenna was confused. When I hired him, he signed a paper that he's responsible for the safety of the equipment and that he almost ruined the tractor. So, honey, he's going to have to compensate me for the damage. It's going to be $500,000 worth of repairs. $500,000 pale. Jenna, where are we going to get that kind of money? You know we live very modestly. That's your concern. When she gets out of the hospital, your husband should think about how he's going to pay me back. Let him take out a loan or go to the north to work. I don't care. He has to pay me back. How can you do that? Jenna resented. You provoked this situation, didn't you? I was told you didn't let the men rest after the fire. They were tired from working all day. And when Andrew crashed, you didn't even give them any help. I'm not a doctor, the owner grinned. All the more reason to help him in the hospital. What do you want now? All right, let him get better. Jenna jumped out of the car without thanking the driver. That's it. I wish she'd waited for the bus. And again the girl's heart squeezed with heavy premonitions. What else will happen? To the emergency room. She went in, looking worried and helpless. Girl, can I help you with something? A guard came up to her and looked at her questioningly. Yes, I need to know about the patient's condition. So ask the nurse on duty. The guy nodded sympathetically and led her into a small office. There at the table sat a woman of huge size with appetite. giving smoked chicken. The sight made Jenna feel uncomfortable for some reason. A nasty nausea came up to her throat. The woman, seeing her, hastily wiped her mouth, and even the last bite asked, "Are you on what matter for hospitalization?" "No. I would like to know how Andrew, who was brought in yesterday after the accident, is feeling." "Why did you come here?" Raised eyebrows, drawls, nurse closing a container of chicken. "Call surgery." "I did, but they told me to call back later." "But I can't just sit around and wait." "Wait for what?" The nurse snorted indifferently. "Your Andrew is dead. They've already taken him to the morgue." "How dead?" Jenna whispered. Her eyes went black. She couldn't remember anything else. The girl woke up to a pungent odor. The same aunt was poking her literally in a bout of sweat. Jenna was lying on the couch in that very office. But now she woke up. The nurse said in a satisfied voice, "What's so flimsy? You can't say a word to these young people. Kelly, get away from the girl. I'll do it myself. Go home already." There was another voice, a little indignant and harsh. Just then, Jenna saw another woman in a bathrobe, probably a little older than herself. She asked how she was feeling, helped Ira up. They went outside for some fresh air. "You'll have to forgive my colleague for being tactless. Kelly, for not thinking. Is it possible to say such things so easily?" Did the girl justify herself? "It's just professional burnout, I guess. You stop feeling other people's pain." But that doesn't excuse her, of course. "I'm sorry, so it's true." "Andrew's dead?" Jenna asked, and tears sprang from her eyes. "Unfortunately, I can't give you any details. Let's calm down a little bit, and I'll take you to the doctor." The girl got a phone call. She was on the phone while she was looking at Jenna. "Who are you?" "Andrew?" she asked after the phone call. "My wife, for you, inviting you to talk to the head doctor. Come on, I'll walk you out." Jenna had no idea where she was being led. Didn't listen to the words of comfort. In her head sounded the drumbeat, "Dead, dead." How is it possible? After all, just yesterday Andrew was there alive and well, and then he snapped and ran away. Jenna could see him leaving the yard in the haze of the approaching fire. If she'd known yesterday, she would have held him back, kept him out. And then everyone would have judged her. Andrew would still be alive, but can you go back in time? In the office of the chief physician, she was met by a short, representative man in a white coat. He almost paternally put his arm around the girl's shoulders, sat her down in a soft chair, and brought her a glass of water. The chief physician sat down next to her, sympathetically lightly squeezed Jenna's palms in his hand. "Be strong, my dear. That's how it happened. Till death asks when to come. And we doctors, unfortunately, we are not gods. What happened?" Barely audible, Jenna asked. "I was told the ER doctor promised Andrew would be saved. On the phone this morning, the ER said everything was fine. The ER doctor couldn't say anything. I'm sure the ER must have gotten a call from an intern. She had no right to tell you that. We thought we'd call you later, and you came in on your own. I apologize to the emergency room nurse for being tactless. We'll punish her." "So what happened?" Jenna repeated. "My question." The doctor sighed, remained silent, as if gathering his thoughts, and then explained that Andrew had been brought in with massive internal bleeding. They had planned to perform a diagnostic surgery first, but before it began, the patient became ill and died on the table. It all happened very quickly. There was nothing we could do to help him. I just got a call from the pathologist saying it was a blood clot. Heavy bleeding caused him to move. The clot clogged the vessel and there was instant death, said the head doctor. You understand, we were powerless in this situation. Jenna listened silently and cried. And the head doctor said something. He also gently squeezed her hand. Then she offered to give her some kind of sedative injection. I probably shouldn't. Remember Jenna, of my situation, I'm pregnant. That's how the doctor shook his head. Sighed heavily. You poor girl. Well, you hang in there. You need to be strong now. Try to think first of all about the baby, and then the trouble will go away a little. After he asked what Jenna arrived at the hospital and offered a company car so that she could get home. The girl agreed, nodded. She had no strength to go to the bus station at all. You try to get some rest, he advised, carefully seating Jenna in the work jeep. When you get home, sleep a little. And then, as time passes, don't forget to check in at our women's health clinic. The doctor was very caring and genuinely sympathetic to the girl, and seemed to be trying to do his best to ease her pain at least a little. Andrew, when can he be picked up? Jenna came to her senses in the car. The body can be picked up from the morgue this afternoon, and the paperwork will be all ready. There's someone else there to take care of the funeral arrangements. The head doctor gently touched her arm. Wouldn't you have to handle everything yourself? Andrew only has an old mom left. Clashed. No one else. Well, clearly, you're trying to keep your cool after all. Having said that, the head doctor slammed the car door and briskly walked towards the hospital. And Jenna looked at his back and thought in her head, what a good doctor. Not that fat ear from the emergency room. What's the head doctor's name? Wow, she didn't ask. Or he said it, and she just didn't remember it. Anyway, who cares what his name is? All the way to Moose Creek, Jenna cried quietly. The driver was silent, staring at the road. That's how they got there. At the house stood Betty, old woman, leaning against a tree, this stick instead of a cane, and waited to see what her daughter-in-law would say. Her mother knew at once from her look that something terrible had happened. It wasn't until Jenna said Andrew was dead. Betty fell. The mother's heart failed. Chuck took care of all the funeral arrangements for Andrew and Betty. The villagers all helped with money, except Peter. He, as soon as he learned that Andrew had died, ran to Jenna's house, shouting that now she must pay him back for repairing the tractor. The poor woman couldn't answer him. She just sobbed to her heart's content. What repair could she talk about now, when she had lost both her husband and her mother-in-law, who was like a mother to her? And Peter did not stop, threatened to sue. And only when Chuck grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and dragged him out into the yard to calm the moose a little. Mother-in-law, but who else would answer? He hissed to the glory of hands off. I already did. Chuck answered quietly, although it wouldn't hurt to punch you in the face. All you think about is money. What a bastard you are. And if you think about it, Andrew died because of me. What are you talking about, you idiot? The farmer was indignant. I drove him down that road. And you didn't pull the pipe out. Chuck agreed. But we were all tired as dogs that day, and you drove it into the field. I was afraid of missing an extra penny, and we were fools to listen. Yeah, if it was Andrew, anyone could have been in our favor. Anyway, you're going to be a nuisance. You're sure you'll scare me? The farmer grinned. I've seen such hounds, and he'll come crawling back to me for a job, and I won't take it. You'll starve to death. I won't take it. After this, I'd rather die than work for you. Well, Peter nodded and left the yard, where there were still 2 coffin lids. Then there was a funeral and a wake. Jenna did not remember everything well, thanks to the neighbors and all the other villagers, supported as they could, as the young woman went through it all. It is hard to imagine how she did not lose her baby from the experience. It was also difficult to understand. But it was this tiny life that was just budding inside Jenna that probably gave her strength. But it was so bitter and painful. She had never told her husband that they were having a baby, had she? She hadn't had the time. And Betty hadn't been happy with the news. Now they would be angels protecting them on earth. A little time passed and the pain, a little subsided. It was time to move on. Jenna thought long and hard about what she should do. Maybe leave Moose Creek, where her stepfather wouldn't be happy to see her go. She didn't want to go back to her hometown. Except Moose Creek, she had no other place on earth where she could take refuge from all the hardships and carry her baby in peace. And only the shameless Peter circled over the young woman. Almost every day he showed up and reminded her of her duty. Jenna sincerely did not understand why she had to pay anything. Once she even tried to threaten the farmer that she would go to the police, to which he only laughed at the police, saying so forward, "My son-in-law is the boss and he'll deal with you. Where the hell did you come from? Maybe you ran away from your town, and there maybe you've been doing something else." What nonsense. Jenna was indignant. Maybe it's nonsense. My son-in-law will find something to pin on you. So sit tight and don't move and look for money, Peter told her. And then one day he showed up at her place at the end of May. I've been thinking, he said, reclining in Betty's favorite chair. What can't you really give me? After all, I have a proposition to make. What is it? Jenna asked cautiously. Do you have something to please me? Allude he? A farmer. Anyway, and you work a man's duty. You're out of your mind, screamed Jenna. Get out of my house. Look, don't fight it. I'm the boss. This is my land, my village. What I want is what I want. And if you don't, your house could suddenly burst into flames. It can happen with wiring and all that. Peter grinned impudently. Take it. Do I like you? Really? Why did you start talking? It's the grief that subsides. You're just kinder. It's okay. I'm calling you fat. Have you no shame? Gasping with indignation, Jenna said, Go away. If you don't want to do it the hard way, you'll have to do it the hard way. Peter stood up and went at her. Jenna shrank into the wall. The farmer grabbed her and pushed her onto the couch. Please don't. I'm pregnant, she shrieked. That's what stunned Peter. And silent. Nobody in the village knows. Not Andreevna, is it? Anyway, what do I care? I don't mind your belly at all. We don't know how it would have ended. It was just about that time. Jenna Chuck was walking by the house. He saw Peter coming through the window. The guy, without thinking, swung over the fence, ran into the house, and with one powerful punch sent the farmer to the far corner of the room. Bastards, muttered Peter, rubbing his long jaw with his ears. You're going to answer for everything. You, Chuck, will answer for the beatings tomorrow. I'll write a report on you, shouted Jenna in tears. Write it, you fool. The farmer shouted and left the house, slamming the door. And Jenna and Chuck sat for a long time, thinking about what to do next. Chuck, as promised earlier, was no longer working for the farmer. He now drove every day to the district center, found a job there in the processing plant forests. Chuck encouraged other men in the village to quit working for the unscrupulous farmer. But everyone had a shirt on his back. And where else would you find work? It's good from the bench, a car of your own, no family. Maybe they swear. What should they do? Wife's children live from their pennies, so all the other men continued to work for Peter. I understood the word that in this situation, everyone will not support Jenna. And not because they don't believe her, but simply because they are afraid of being left without means of subsistence. Maybe you and I could move to the district center. Chuck suggested it. All away from this creek, rent an apartment, and live together. Chuck liked Jenna, and lately he kept daring to talk to her. Now he had the chance. Thank you, Chuck, but I can't do this. You see, I don't love you. You're a very good friend. And only I love Andrew, but he's gone. And you need to move on. I'm pregnant. Chuck, hearing this, looked at Jenna in surprise, and then suddenly knelt down in front of her and whispered hotly, Jenna, honey, that's wonderful. Andrew is going to have a son. I'll take him in like I'm going to raise my own. And I'll never reproach you for anything. You trust me, Chuck. You're a good man. But I'm sorry, I can't do that, so please understand me. Chuck rose from his knees, sighed, nodded. In response, on the threshold, he turned around and said, I understand, and you forgive me and know that I will always help you. Just tell me, Peter, don't worry. I think I know how to calm him down. And he left. Jenna locked the door with a strong deadbolt half the night. Then she didn't sleep. I wondered what was going to happen next. It was a little embarrassing to do that to Chuck, but she said honestly that she didn't love him. What can your heart tell you? Nothing. We're small, we'll manage. She whispered, stroking her barely visible tummy. Everything will be all right. Mommy and you and Daddy and Grandma are up there in heaven watching over us. They're always with us. The next evening, the farmer came to see Jenna again. Seeing him, Jenna turned pale in horror. Would all the things of yesterday happen again? Anyway, Peter said glumly, I won't touch you anymore. Just live, but try not to show your face to me. He turned and walked away, leaving Jenna completely bewildered. What was it? Why had the farmer changed so suddenly? Didn't she know it was all Chuck? Every more or less large population center has its own landlord. And they're far from law-abiding citizens. Strange as that may seem, they are honored and respected by the local government. The police do not touch them, because these comrades are both patrons and sponsors, and small crooks help the police to find. There was a watchman in the neighborhood. That's where Chuck went. David was of age. He'd been around the block more than once. And now, settled in a distant district center, he was selling fruits and vegetables. He had several outlets. In between, he did good deeds for those in power, solving conflicts that people were afraid to go to the police with. Chuck got to him through the owner of the sawmill, asked him to set him up, explained the situation. Apparently, very much to you. Here this woman, since you so in a closer look, noticed the owner. Her husband was a friend of mine. She's the only one who's pregnant now. And that old goat thought he could do whatever he wanted. The owner was a man, understanding and fair. He immediately contacted David, and in an hour Chuck was already at his place. The old Azeri's main values, despite his dubious past, were family and children. So he agreed to help calm the farmer down. After he left, he called the chief of police, listening and said, after greetings and duty words about the weather and personal life, "There's a kid here to see me about your father-in-law complaining." He said, "What is Peter doing?" The chief of police is not to say that he did not know what was going on, but preferred to turn a blind eye to it. You see, the girl's all alone. It's hard on her, so let him get off her back. You remember how it was in the neighboring district of one owner of fields and farms? Cattle pestilence, or hay. His base burned down. He was hurting a poor orphan there too. They see everything up there and punish those who hurt the underprivileged. But do you understand me? The chief of police vowed to sensitize his father-in-law, and soon Peter was sitting in his son-in-law's office. What they talked about is unknown. Only the farmer left the office red as a cancer. And then he went home and talked to Jenna. Promised not to touch her. And he kept his word. Jenna exhaled. She didn't even believe that there wouldn't be any more upheaval. But there was. She lived quietly, worked in the club, regularly went to the women's counseling center, preparing to become a mother. Once in a while, Chuck would drop in for a visit. But they remained friends. Chuck never once again started a conversation about Jenna agreeing to be with him. He realized the young woman's heart was closed to him. Though he loved her sincerely, Chuck helped Jenna around the house. In August, he brought her wood coal, fixed the roof a little. In general, life went on as usual. In the district hospital, over time, began to forget the cases of death of a patient on the operating table. That's just the way it is, especially since in that case, it was not the doctor's fault. All the documents said so. And only the young surgeon knew how it was all really new and kept silent, because he could not change anything. He realized there was no point in fighting windmills. Rob was born and raised in this district center. He had dreamed of becoming a doctor since childhood. Yeah, but he realized he didn't have much of a chance. He came from a simple family. His mother was a store clerk, his father a bus driver. His parents couldn't teach him how to get into medical school for free. It's like going into space, a pipe dream. But there was a loud friend named Mike. We were in the same class. Mike was a hardcore C student who was a bully. He'd get into a fight with anyone. We had to fight. Where could I go? Mike's teachers never scolded his friends. And how could they? His parents are very respected people in the neighborhood. His father is the head doctor of a hospital. His mother, a colleague of a junior high school teacher. They turned a blind eye to Mike's shenanigans. But Rob was regularly called into the principal's office to find out who he was fighting with again. Why did he break a window or disrupt a lesson? Of course, Rob didn't break windows or press the bell in the hallway. He was just there for those moments. Mike did it. But what kind of friend does that? So Rob kept his mouth shut. And then he got the full measure of reprimands from teachers and reproaches from parents. Parents, by the way, all understood and scolded the son that the friend covers. Rob only said they were friends. I do not give away friends. Over the years, there were fewer such cases. Mike calmed down, and Rob became a diligent student in the 11th grade. When the question of his future profession came up, Rob honestly told his teachers that he dreamed of becoming a surgeon. He studied well, and of course, he could try. But the teachers only shrugged their shoulders in confusion. It would be hard to get in. Mike, looking at his friend, also said that he would be a doctor, and his teachers supported him. They said he would follow in his father's footsteps, and he would definitely get in for a fee. Right. You wanted to go to law school, Rob wondered. Or did your father insist? Yeah, it wasn't my dad's fault, Mike admitted. I just thought we should stick together. We're friends. Rob agreed. But I don't think I'll do the same thing, you'll see. Mike winked at him. Soon Rob and his parents were summoned to the head doctor, and Mike's father Alex offered to send him to medical school. It was much easier to enroll in it, and the hospital was obliged to pay the tuition. Of course, Rob and his parents happily agreed. Needless to say, Mike was also given the exact same referral. Rob passed the exams with flying colors. Mike somehow, but passed out of the competition on the target direction, and soon their student life began. They lived in the same dorm room and studied in the same group. Over the years, Mike got more seriously into his studies, but he found it difficult, unlike Rob. He could grasp it all on the fly. He'd also helped his friend and managed to help him write papers for exams. In short, the guys, by the time it was necessary to determine the specialization, were among the best students, and therefore one, as he dreamed, began to learn the subtleties of surgery. The other went into ideology. True, Mike's father often looked into the institute, inquired about his son's studies, and obviously his successes, supported financially. But no one complained, neither the teachers nor Mike himself. Rob studied by himself, achieved everything with his own head and hands. The years of study flew by unnoticed. On the search for a job, could not worry about the direction of places were provided in his native village. Moreover, there were also lifting allowances and payments under the program doctor. In short, the guys returned in high spirits. Rob's mood was a bit darkened when he was denied service housing as a young specialist. He lived with his elderly parents, but Mike was immediately given a 2-room apartment in a new and 3-story building in the center of the village. And it didn't matter that his parents had a 2-story mansion. Rob was a little hurt by this, but he didn't let it bother him. He realized that living in his parents' house would help his father and mother more. And Mike would look after their health. What's there to compare? The head doctor will do anything for his son. And so the workday began. It turned out that the load on the surgical department was decent. Although the village people have all sorts of problems happened, and simple operations did Rob in more complicated. He wasn't afraid of hardship, and his hands were golden. But the cripple was a quitter. Although he was lucky in the department, he had a partner, Ethan, a geologist, already a doctor of years. Rob was the only surgeon on the ward, and it was a huge workload. But Rob wasn't in the habit of complaining, even though another surgeon was expected soon. It's okay, he can handle it. He'll be patient. That spring evening, a young man was brought in by ambulance after an accident. They said he had overturned in the tractor. Multiple contusions, fractures. Suspicion of internal bleeding required urgent diagnosis. Rob notified the chief medical officer immediately. Probably need an airlift, since the Alex patient was a heavy drinker that night. The wife was celebrating an anniversary at a restaurant with many guests. The chief physician listened to the doctor and said, "Mole, do not panic prematurely at first to try to cope with their own forces." And there, as you can see, will be. There was another difficulty. That very night, and at the stadium, Ethan himself went down with hypertensive crisis and lay in the neighboring therapy under the drip. Mike had to be summoned immediately. The chief physician tensed up. What is Ethan thinking up? Let him go and work. His blood pressure is 220/180. What kind of worker is he? Rob objected. Send Mike to the hospital. He's already drunk. How could he? Rob was indignant. He knew Ethan was sick this afternoon. I told him not to drink, to be his backup. Why are you so angry? Rob? Alex grinned. I'm the head doctor, and I'm amazed who should rest and who should work. Mike has a well-deserved day off. He has the day off. And I don't know what it is at all. Rob's angry, but it doesn't matter now. A man could die. In that case, call for an airlift now. We need an emergency operation. Okay, Mike is coming. but he's had half a glass of wine, I'll allow it. And soon Mike showed up at the hospital glum, angry, and pretty drunk. You're gonna do anesthesia like that? Rob gasped, and I won't allow it. Don't you get it? Mike grinned, preparing for surgery. You don't want to go to the stadium. Well, you do what you want. And he wanted to leave the department. When the head doctor showed up, also angry and drunk, spoiling the whole party, he said to Rob in a baleful glare, "Do you know how much it costs? I'll get a chip off my back if it's nothing serious. They'll take away my bonus. But it's a serious case," said Rob. "We'll get to the bottom of it. Mike, take care of the patient now." The head doctor commanded and turned to Rob. "And you go, get ready for the operation. Don't talk too much." Rob realized that he was in a trap. On the one hand, he had to save the patient. And on the other hand, how could a fallen colleague be allowed back to work? But after all, the chief medical officer was now in charge. So Rob went to the operating room. The guy was already on the table. Mike had given him the anesthetic. "Give it to him," he grinned. "He's out anyway. You're a fool. Just told him Rob on the vitals. Look." And then the tech banned nastily. The patient's heart had stopped. All resuscitative measures were performed, but the heart could not be restarted. It was afterwards, when Rob was sitting on the floor in despair right in front of the surgical table. The head doctor walked into the operating room, threw a glance up his nose, falling asleep at his son's window, then swooped down on Rob. "Was this your fault?" hissed the doctor. "You endangered the patient." The nurse, who was nearby all the time, could not keep silent and stood up in defense of the surgeon. Rob hadn't done anything yet when his heart stopped, and I can confirm. "Confirm, you say?" the head doctor said slowly. "That's good. In fact, I advise everyone to keep quiet. The patient died because a clot broke off. Do you know that without an autopsy?" Rob asked tiredly and turned his gaze to the bass floating already on the window mic. "I think Sarkozy's mistake." "Silence, silence," hissed the chief physician. "If you want to stay in the profession, then do not even dare to think like that. My son is not guilty of anything." "Understood. If you come forward, they'll blame you and your nurse too. You want to see if it works." And he left with his son. Rob sat next to the dead patient, staring at one point. "Nastya, these are the first deaths I've ever had." Slowly, he said, "You don't know how hard it is? It's even harder to realize that it might not have been. How can you go against the head doctor?" sighed the nurse. "He has a friend in the regional ministry. He'll eat you up, won't he?" "Me too." "Rob, let's keep quiet. We haven't done anything. If everything comes to light, it'll be without us. Otherwise, we'll be dead." "Do you think it will?" Rob grinned. "The pathologist will write what's required. You've already figured it out. How am I supposed to work here? By gritting your teeth. You've forgotten that you have to work off the referral and the 1 million that you've been given and haven't been given yet. Besides, nobody's going to get that guy back." Rob nodded tiredly in response and secretly did not go outside the surgical department. The relatives of the dead guy believed the doctors, and no one was looking into the situation. Well, the patient died. It happens. Every doctor, unfortunately, has his own little cemetery. Rob continued to work in the department. Their friendship with Nicholas was over in a flash. But Mike was not particularly worried, not for the lost friend, not for the guy who died on the operating table. He worked as before. And even at the end of the summer, he was awarded some ministerial diploma as an excellent specialist. Ethan, having recovered from his illness, returned to the ward. He knew about everything, of course, but he kept quiet too. Only once he whispered to Rob, "Don't worry, one day they'll answer for everything. In the meantime, do your job. I'll always be there for you." And indeed, in all the difficult cases in the future, Ethan was at his post. And Mike, despite all the accolades and honors, didn't do his job right. But no one said a word to him, as it was more expensive to contact the head doctor. And in September, Mike suddenly went to the mountains, and it was nothing that he had not yet worked the allotted time, and had already received his 1,000,000. Dad found him a better place in the ministry. Alex just realized that he had to hide his son, put him away. What if this story comes out one day, and since Cole will be gone, everyone will forget? In place of Mike's soon-arrived Benjamin Serious Man, who had previously worked in a military hospital, and with him his wife. The surgeon Emily was just as good as her husband. Rob exhaled a little. He could relax a little, because he was always on duty for their operation. He realized he was about to lose his mind. With Benjamin and Emily, they even became friends. The spouses invited their colleague to visit, told interesting cases from practice. Rob wondered how, with such experience, they suddenly came to such a backwoods for money. Emily honestly admitted, "Yes, and a little want to rest. It's easier in the village hospital anyway. Easier when you have helpers." Rob grinned. "Well, you have me now." Emily laughed. "And I don't like it at your place. I just don't understand what kind of a fruit your head doctor is. It seems so all right and polite, and the eyes smiles. I feel like I have to be careful with him. Is that right?" Only I nodded to Rob and said nothing more. The couple just looked at each other. There was another reason Benjamin and Emily had come here. In a remote village lived Benjamin's mother, an old woman. How many times Benjamin convinced her to move in with them? It was useless with Emily. Her mother kept saying she would never leave home. I had to accept it. They decided to move closer to her. Everything would be under supervision. One day, in early October, she called Benjamin and complained that the stove was smoking a little. Maybe a brick had fallen off or soot had clogged the chimney. Benjamin was free that day, and Emily had no duty. Leaving his wife with his 12-year-old daughter, he drove to the village. As it turned out, the match was fine. It's just that the old mother overdid it a little too much and clogged up the whole stack. Once again, Benjamin started a song saying, "Mom, let's go to live with us," but she just waved back. Benjamin got into the car to go to the district center and could not start the engine. To leave this village, another mode of transport, where there were only 7 yards, it was problematic. Tomorrow morning was work time. Benjamin tried to call a cab, but the neighborhood drivers said that they would not go to such a remote area off-road for any money. And it's slushy outside. Who wants to wash their car afterwards? So Benjamin called Rob. "I can come and get you to the service station," Rob agreed. "But I'm on duty. If they replace you, I can be alone with my daughter, who is not a little girl anymore." Benjamin asked hopefully, "I don't know what to do." Rob agreed. And so at the 7th hour of the evening, he left the district center on the road. One way should take about an hour. Rob calculated that he should be back by 10 o'clock. The road out of the district center was smooth, but soon the asphalt ran out, and the car ran, cursing the local roads. Rob continued on his way. He passed some village, turned in its direction. This way he could get to Benjamin's mom's village faster. Rob noted to himself the strange logic of the local authorities. They put a bus stop right on the highway, and people have to walk 2 kilometers to get home. Who came up with that? He doesn't ride buses himself. And then he saw a young woman walking towards the village, carefully avoiding the puddles. She was carefully hugging her huge belly. Rob decided to stop. "Young lady, let me drive you," he offered and opened the door. "Get in the parlor." "Thank you," the stranger said confusedly. "But I better walk, or I'll moralize all the carpets in the car." And she nodded at her shoes. "Earned by dirt from mine," smiled Rob. "Sit down. And how does your husband let you go in this position?" The woman answered nothing, only sighed. Then she nodded and sat down. "Careful in the parlor. Where are you coming from so late?" Rob asked. "When did they get off the bus?" "I had an appointment at the clinic today," I said. Rob shook his head. She didn't answer anything, but nodded again. Soon they came to an old cottage that the woman pointed out. After thanking her, she got out and headed into the yard. Rob pulled off after a few meters. He realized something was wrong with the tire. He got out, looked around for a nail or gravel. "Empty tire. You got a problem." I called out to him the other day for a lesson, who was standing in the yard watching Rob's actions. She had a flat tire. Rob shouted to her, "It's all right, I'll fix it." He got the spare. The jack had to work faster. It's getting dark in the fall, and Benjamin's waiting. And he's off shift. What if the head doctor decides to check it out? It's not working on his time. It's no big deal. But Alex doesn't like him. Since sometime, like he dislikes him. Soon the job was done. Rob put the punctured tire in the trunk and looked puzzled at his hands. How would they be washed now? He didn't notice the recent po' boy coming up to him. Let's go to my house, suggested that she understand what this was all about. You'll clean yourself up. Have some tea. You must be tired from working on the wheel. Thank you, of course. But I have to go, Rob said. My colleague is waiting for me. He waited longer and will wait another 15 minutes. The woman smiled. Then the village is about 10 minutes away. Let's go inside. Where are you going with such dirty hands? Yes, you should take care of your hands. I agree, Rob smiled back. The house was simple, too simple. There was poverty in the place. An old, though neatly beaten stove, an old kitchen table covered in cracks. Clearly spiraled a solid anniversary. As Rob washed his face, he realized the woman lived alone. A single toothbrush stood on a shelf, just the woman's cheap shampoos. The woman. Meanwhile, she warmed the kettle, pulled out some jam. Try some, she smiled at Rob. It's the first time I've cooked strawberries myself this year. Oh no, I'm still going. Try it, please, as if to ask, she said. I should be able to thank you for your help. All right, Rob agreed. For some reason, he felt sorry for this sweet, young mother-to-be who lived alone in the middle of nowhere. Go ahead, strawberries are my favorite and mine. My name is Jenna, by the way, Rob. He sat down at the table. From drank tea, delicious tea, praised Rob. I don't get that familiar flavor. How is it delusional? Jenna smiled. I like it too, and Andrew liked it a lot. Where is he? Careful, asked Rob. Why are you alone? Dead. He rolled over on a tractor this spring. Died in the hospital. Jenna said bitterly and looked away. Rob followed her gaze. Jenna was looking at the wall next to the kitchen cabinet. There in a frame was a small picture. Rob's hand trembled involuntarily when he saw who was in the picture. He recognized the guy who had died from the wrong anesthesia. Yeah, and Jenna was just talking about a car accident and dying in the hospital. And that was definitely in the spring. Is that your husband? Rob asked quietly. Yes, he still couldn't forgive himself for letting him go that morning. Andrew didn't even know we were having a baby. And Jenna told him about the fires, about the men's work, and Rob listened, not knowing where to put his eyes. He felt bad about the whole situation. He could have done something for the poor guy, but he couldn't, and now his widow was sitting there, pouring her heart out. You should know who she's been pouring tea for all this time. Rob secretly thought she was responsible for Andrew's death. She should have called the region directly, argued, demanded. Let them deal with it later. But it could have saved the guy's life. You can't bring back the past, he finally said. Do not worry, so you now need to think about the child. I whispered. Jenna wipes away the tears. Otherwise, I'd go crazy. I'm sorry I'm not telling you my funny story. I mean, you've got things to do, and I'm running late. And I'll be traveling absent-mindedly, Rob nodded. You stay here, and I'll leave you my phone number. You call me if you need anything. What if I do? But what if you get sick? I can come to the hospital, take you away. Thank you, but I think I can handle it. I'm used to dealing with my own problems. Life has taught me that. Rob wrote his phone number on a piece of paper, thanked her for the delicious tea and jam, and walked briskly outside. Turned around at the car window, he saw the slim figure of Jenna, hugging her huge belly too, and a new wave of shame came over him. Running away, cowardly running away. This girl clearly needed help. What can he do? All the way given. He mentally reasoned only about it. At the end, he decided. One of these days, he'll come to do some more chores. What will help? Winter's coming. What do we need to fix in the house? Benjamin was glad to see a colleague, but Benjamin's mom wouldn't let them go. She fed them dinner, gathered pickles and jam for her son, and gave Rob a couple of jars. He didn't have to convince her he didn't need any. His mom makes his own winter food too. Where's it going? The old woman wouldn't hear of it. This hotel only asked to return the containers later. Yes, my mother is like that, Benjamin said with a smile as they left the house. She's used to tending to her vegetable garden and you can't move her. I'm hooked on this house. What can you do, visiting her like this? She must be very happy to have you back in the neighborhood. She is. Well, I'm thinking it's time to settle down myself. I'm happy with the hospital. It's just Alex is a little stressful. I get the feeling he's a tricky one. He is. It's best not to mess with him, Rob advised. Benjamin gave him a questioning look. Once again, the young colleague didn't say anything about the head doctor, although he obviously knew something. Benjamin couldn't get him to talk. They quickly put a rope on Benjamin's car and set off on their way back. They were home by 0 o'clock. Rob quickly changed his clothes and rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, everything went without incident that night. 2 days passed, and all the while Rob's mind was still reeling from the encounter with the unfortunate young widow. How was she? She's due to give birth in about a month. She's all alone. How did he know? Yes, he really wanted to go and see her. And at the same time, he felt a great guilt for the girl, because her husband had died in front of him. Finally, his legitimate day off, he decided to do it. It was Saturday, a sunny and even warm day for October. Rob's car was steadily going along the already known road. Now he drove more carefully, remembering the broken tire. Here was a familiar village, that old house. Rob stopped at the gate. He got out of the car and looked into the yard lad and the dog of the council, barking, warning his guest that he's the boss. Hi, buddy. Where's your mistress? Rob said and cautiously made the gate, not knowing whether the chain would reach the gate or not. It was interesting. The first time he didn't notice the dog. The guard had slept through the guests then. 3. It's a mess. What are you yelling about? Rob hears Jenna's voice from behind a dilapidated gray ear. Who's here to see us? In a minute, Jenna came out of the corner of the barn with a bucket of carrots in her hands. Oh, hello, it's you. A little embarrassed Jenna. You're on your way to a friend's house again. No, I'm on other business today. Rob was embarrassed for some reason, but then he realized it. Why are you carrying such heavy things? You're not supposed to give it to me. It's small. Jenna smiled. It's time to dig the carrots anyway. So you're doing it yourself. Who else? Jenna shrugged. And tell me you dig your own potatoes too. No, the potatoes helped. Neighbors removed a little bit, and carrots I can and myself. So give me the bucket. Where to? There's more. Rob took the bucket and looked at the girl questioningly. Yes, under the shed, Jenna waved toward the house. There's plenty more carrots. I only dug a meter of the bed. Carrots were born this year. Sadly, sighed Jenna. Now we'll do it quickly. Oh, why the inconvenience? You were going about your business. Rob didn't explain anything. He just dumped the carrots where Jenna had indicated. Then he took a determined step forward toward the barn. Then he stopped, nodded his head, saying, "Bring in the landlady." Soberly at this time realized that the guest was not going to take anything, rumbled unhappily, hid in the doghouse. Jenna smiled embarrassedly, shrugged again, and led the assistant to the vegetable garden. Rob, the country boy digging carrots, knows carefully not to cut. When he lifted the rare, worn on the carrots, and then deftly pulled out and gently tossed to the side. Jenna tried to help, but Rob immediately pointed out another job for her, bringing a small stool that stood by the water barrel and bucket. The buckets with the large root vegetables were filling up fast. Rob only had time to carry them under the shed. In the meantime, they chatted with Jenna. Rob told her a story from his childhood, how he and a friend had climbed into the school garden to pick radishes. In the evening, when the school watchman had gone home on business, climbed over the fence and pulled pockets full. Then there was a snooze under the poppy column. Ate while sitting in the slabs by the house under construction. It was so good. And most importantly, I still don't know why we needed that radish, Rob said with a laugh. We had radishes growing in our gardens, and much better. Big, sweet radishes. That one was small and bitter. But no, we had to steal it and eat it. As they say, vinegar is sweet for free. Smiling, Jenna suggested. Probably, agreed Rob. I think the desire to steal something at least once appears in a child. Jenna remembered. I used to carry sorrel with the girls. For some reason, none of them grew much. But on an abandoned farmstead where no one lived, for 10 years it grew for 10 years. So we'll get together with our girlfriends. No worse than you. We look around. Then we crawl across the street to get there. We tear it up quickly and run away. He's no cleaner than Willie, but he's not ours. Mom says not to take other people's stuff, but I want to. Rob, smiling, nodded back, working the shovel and glancing at Jenna and sitting on the stool. Now in the sunlight he saw on her face cute, slightly noticeable freckles. Nose slightly pulled out, eyes so big and blue like that sky stubbornly, and Sasha's blonde curls were always trying to pop out from under a thin kerchief, and Jenna always corrected them with her thin hand. She was also thin, graceful, like a girl. And only her big belly was a reminder that she was about to become a mom. Jenna, can I ask you a question? Rob let go of the shovel for a moment and looked at the girl carefully. Why are you here? You're talking about your mom. She lives far away. Maybe you'd better go to her now. It's hard to have a baby all by yourself. My mom is really far away. Jenna was a little slow and continued very far away. She died when I was finishing school. My stepfather managed to take over her house. He's a bad man. I ran away from him to the city. Then I met Andrew, but God didn't let us stay together much longer. Anyway, no more on Earth. I ain't got no home now except here in Moose Creek. I'm sorry, is that hard for you to remember? Oh, it's all right. It's all right. It's just the way things are. Moose Creek is a good place to live too. I have a job here. I'm on maternity leave. I'm gonna go back to my club. Where do you work? I tell you all about me. I don't know anything about you. I'm confused, Rob. Are you a doctor at the hospital? No, I'm in charge of fire safety on the administrative side, Rob answered. And with renewed vigor, he started pulling out the carrots. He didn't want to admit he was a surgeon. She was bound to ask him about the Andrew case. Didn't he do the surgery? And then it would be harder to lie. Otherwise, he's just an administrative assistant. Rob liked this girl and didn't want to, bringing up unpleasant topics to nurse her wounds. Are you married? Just asking Jenna. Anything else? No, it didn't work out. Strangely enough, Jenna shrugged and smiled embarrassedly. I'm sorry, I don't understand. You're such a distinguished, respectable man. I'm alone. Isn't there a decent girl in your hospital? There are girls, Rob grinned, just not the right ones. No, don't get me wrong, I'm normal. I just want to meet the right one. I haven't met one at school yet. I thought I had. We were friends for a long time. She was in the same class as me. Then she thought I wasn't promising. She found herself a son of rich parents in the city now. Probably married him. Rob continued to work in silence, remembering his story. He'd started dating Molly during his freshman year, and their relationship didn't interfere with his studies. Molly was from the city, but she often ran away to their house, as much as she did in the dorms. At such times, Mike would tactfully withdraw. Rob thought it was true love. And then he saw Molly being driven to the institute in an expensive car by a stylishly dressed guy. He opened the door, kissed her gently goodbye. Molly didn't expect Rob to be on the porch at the time and see everything. He thought she'd start making excuses. She was embarrassed at first, but she came up to him and said so simply, "But you realized it was over between us." Rob nodded calmly in response, though there was a storm in his soul. I wanted to shout some nasty things, maybe even hit him. Probably Molly was expecting some kind of hysterics from him, and that's why she was even disappointed. I mean, he's not the least bit jealous. He doesn't care. You're a beggar scum, and you always will be. She shouted at him, and I deserve better. Rob wished her happiness, turned around and walked away. That was the first time he'd missed an important lecture, got drunk in a bar, and then it all went away. He got it. What's next? It's nothing. She doesn't deserve what he's going through. And before graduating from the institute, they no longer communicated and pretended that they did not even know each other, although they studied at the same course. Molly came to the graduation ceremony. You will go to your village. With a sneer, she asked. In the village. Rob answered her and went to his classmates. She failed to get him, and they never saw each other again. And that story is long in the past. Only now Rob is very careful in choosing girls, even shuns them. But Jenna was the exception. Yes, in the beginning, he was driven by the desire to simply help the unhappy widow, because he was indirectly responsible for the death of her husband. That's what he thought. But now, talking to Jenna in the vegetable garden just like that, he realized that he really liked this simple young woman and someone else's child. It didn't embarrass him in the slightest. All these thoughts swirled in his head as he wielded the shovel. Jenna, realizing what had hit a sore subject, also remained silent as if apologizing. Then they gathered nets under the dry carrots. And when the work was done, Jenna suggested that Rob come inside for a snack. It was as if I knew that I would have guests today, the girl admitted. Such a borscht cooked borscht, and really was good, as well as pancakes, with the same strawberry jam, and there was also a delicious coda with cooking. As if apologizing, said Jenna, eat, you do not think that I am so pro-fat just cooking love. I forget to eat in the kitchen, I cook, it happens, and then I sit down and think why. Who's good to have a good appetite? 3. Do you have a great dog? Yes, but he's old now. Mama Valia said that about 15 years he is decent, but not critical, smiled Rob. Noblemen can live up to 20 years. And with good care, how do you have even more? Afterwards, he thanked his mistress and began to say goodbye. Rob, I still did not understand why you came to me. Not to dig carrots. Jenna looked him in the eye. I'm sorry, but I don't understand. I just wanted to help you. And you see how lucky I was, Rob said honestly. And immediately added and decided, consider me your friend. Let's use the first name. You don't mind? I don't mind. Barely blushing, Jenna replied. That's great, Rob smiled. So you have my phone number then. Call me anytime. I'll come over as soon as I can. I'll help you with whatever you need. Thanks, but no thanks. But don't think I'm some kind of sick, crazy person. I just want to help you. But who else in this village will help you? It's probably just old ladies. There are young people, but not many, and they all have their own concerns. I had a good assistant friend, Andrew, but it's been a month since Chuck left for the north. The pay is better there. Now I'll be instead of Glory, Rob laughed. They went outside the gate and stood talking. Suddenly, at high speed, Abdallah's truck passed them on the road. Speeding away went on. The freak swore. Rob fears in the dust. Can't you drive any quieter? He's specifically near my house. Is he speeding up? Jenna sighed. It's the farmer Andrew used to work for, getting revenge. He's getting revenge on me. For what? Rob wondered. Andrew wrecked his new tractor. He then demanded money from me for repairs, and soon he seemed to calm down. And then he had a bad harvest and never fixed his tractor. That's why he's so angry. No, he doesn't touch me, but he does bad things. He's always driving his car around my house. That's good. My laundry's not drying today. Sometimes he drives by, and I'm walking. He's a fool. We've got to teach him a lesson. Yeah, he'll probably calm down. I don't want to mess with him anymore. Jenna lowered her eyes, remembering the sordid scene when Peter had shown up at her door that spring evening. Thank God he's back off. His nastiness says what a rotten man he is. I can't help it. All right, well, you call me if you need anything. Rob waved goodbye and got in the car. Jenna waved back. And then, looking after the deleting, learning machines thought strange. Why? Was a friend coming over? No, he's obviously not a bad person, but it's just unusual. Yesterday, he was a complete stranger. And today, they were digging together so easily in the vegetable garden, chatting, joking, sad, really friendly and cute. God, what am I thinking about? I have someone to take care of and love. And Jenna looked down at her tummy and went out into the yard. Yeah, weird meeting. Strange talk, like the man wanted to say something else but didn't dare. Or maybe Chuck asked him to look after her when he left and he was worried about her being here alone. But he couldn't do anything else. The sawmill's in trouble and money's needed. My mother's been sick since the bench. so I went to the north. Is that Chuck's friend? But Rob didn't say a word about him. No, they don't know each other. It was just a coincidence that she met another good person in her life. Rob drove home and smiled contentedly. He had really enjoyed today. He'd worked and socialized. And once again, he was convinced that Jenna is a wonderful human being who now seems to care about him. And 3 days later, Rob called Jenna. He had just gotten out of the hospital and was on his way home. How come all of a sudden this call? I could hear in her voice that she was very excited. Rob, please tell me, do you know a veterinarian or doctor who can help an animal? I mean, you work at the hospital. What's wrong? Rob stopped, realizing that something serious had happened. And Jenna could barely hold back the tears. Stress, distress, sobbing into the phone. At first, I thought he was just bored. He wouldn't eat anything. Then he started vomiting. Then my neighbor across the street lives across the street. She came and said she saw Peter last night cutting off a piece over the fence. He must have poisoned him. And I can't do anything. I poured egg in his mouth. I gave him kefir. It's no use. He's lying there like a rag. So don't worry, I'll be right there. Rob answered briefly. On the way, he ran into a pharmacy, bought the necessary medicines and supplies, warned his parents that he would be home late. Those thought that the son stayed at the duty again. They just sighed heavily. Yeah, he picked their Rob to do the job. If they'd known, they'd have discouraged him from going to medical school. And Rob was already speeding down the dirt road toward Moose Creek. Good thing the dirt below Falcon was still light. He got there fast. Jenna was in the yard next to the joke, soberly sorted out, and inside, in no way did not want to come out of there, only trembled a small shiver. Soon the learned stools definitely threw poison. He asked Jenna. Grandma Gallia could not lie. Swore that she saw him a piece of meat or what? Threw, cut off fool such and happily grabbed it. Wiping her tears, said Jenna, Rob, are you good at this? Can you help him? Rob only nodded in response. Sure, he's a human doctor, but the causes of disease are about the same for everyone. Only how do you tell Jenna he's a surgeon when he's already lied to her about his specialty? Jenna, I know what I'm doing. He answered briefly, turning on the porch light so I could see better. And go inside, we'll handle this. If he bites you, he doesn't know you. And if he bites you, Rob answered a little sharply. And anyway, he's in such a state now that he can't open his mouth. Go on. I know how to handle dogs. And that was the truth. Rob had been an avid dog person since he was a kid. There were always dogs in his parents' yard. For years, there was a noble dog named Jack. Rob picked him up on the street in first grade and took care of him for many years. Only recently, Jack died of old age. Rob found the Dachshund freezing in a snowdrift in the 8th grade. And he brought it out himself. She was still Rob's mom's favorite and faithfully guarded her slippers in the hallway. In the yard now lived Charlie the half-breed sheepdog. Dad brought him home from work. Probably if he hadn't become a surgeon, Rob would have really gone into veterinary medicine. He carefully pulled the dog on a chain out of the kennel. The trainer didn't resist, just looked at the man pitifully, saying, "What are you going to do with me?" However, he was so bad that it seemed that death would already be a deliverance. "It looks like you're really torn up," Rob said, examining the dog, and he carefully began all the manipulations. An hour later, he went into the house, silently washed his hands and wiped them with a towel. Jenna sat at the kitchen table and looked at him questioningly anxious. "Will she die?" Finally, she asked. "I can't tell yet," Rob admitted honestly. "We'll have to watch. I've done lavage. I've given antidote shots. I just don't know what kind of poison it is. We'll have to do tests, of course. I wish we could do an ultrasound, but our veterinarians in the district center have no equipment. Anyway, let's hope the shots will help. I'll do something else for him in the morning." "In the morning?" Jenna asked and blushed a little. "And when it's too late to drive back, I'll style you in the gym." "Yeah, I can do it in the car, and that's not the point. I just have more shots in the morning. I don't want you to go near him. He'll come back. He'll hurt you." "Thanks, Rob." Jenna looked at him with grateful eyes. "I'm sorry I pulled out on you, but I was so scared. There was no one else to call. And you were right to call. If I didn't know you were an office worker, I'd think you were a doctor. You were so good at it. I've seen you out the window, dialing medications. Giving shots like a pro, Jenna admitted. We are office workers, the same kind of embarrassment, smiled Rob. In fact, I've got such a hand on my pets. To himself, he thought, you've never been so close to failure. Afterward, they had dinner. Jenna didn't cook anything serious, as she said herself, just a salad. She spared the potatoes, but it was so good. Rob was once again convinced what a good hostess Jenna was. And then lying on the couch, Rob thought that something should be done about that farmer, but what could he do? For what? Report him to the police. And you can prove he gave the dog that stuff. Even if the neighbor confirms it, it is not a fact that someone in the countryside will seriously deal with it, and the police only twist the temples. But if they beat you up, it's Rob they'll have to deal with. He doesn't want that, but you can't leave it like that. If the farmer's gone from petty mischief to sabotage, there's no telling what'll happen next. He clearly hates Jenna, and that hatred is only growing. So Rob hasn't figured out how to help. He fell asleep. He woke up at 6:00 a.m. and immediately went out to see his four-legged patient. 3, tied up from the evening. Met him on the doorstep, standing confidently on his paws. When he saw Rob, he even wagged his tail. Best you astray, smiled Rob. Right then, you and I have done everything right. He stroked the dog's head. In response, the animal licked his hand tentatively, then looked faithfully into his eyes. Yes, he remembered. This man is a rescue. He's good, he's his own. And it's okay. I won't give him a shot, he rejoiced to the landlady, who was already bustling in the kitchen. You put it in his drink, only adding the medicine. I'll leave. I wrote it on the bottles. How many drops? 3 days, and call me if you need anything. I'm on my way. Jen is so confused. We'll figure out breakfast. I don't have to get home, change for work. You know, I'm an office worker. I have to be dressed up at all times. Rob smiled ironically. Jenna saw him off and wondered. Something Rob was hiding from her. 3 followed her mistress, following happily by squealing howls as if she wanted to say something. Probably that she and Jenna had made a good friend. Rob made it home and to work on time. The day went by with the usual patient business. In the evening, he was on call, and it wasn't until close to bedtime that he texted Jenna. How was she doing? It was as if Jenna was waiting to hear from him. Immediately, she replied that he was quite well, enjoying life. Probably put him on a chain tomorrow, just like you did. I texted Rob tomorrow morning for your hospital appointment. I'm fine. Good night, answered Jenna. Rob only smiled. Good night. It would be nice, but there is no telling what kind of night it will be. And it is very important that Jenna will be at the polyclinic tomorrow. He doesn't have an appointment, won't meet. I wouldn't want her to see him in a white coat. No, he will tell her everything. But a little later. Yes, he'll tell her everything later. She'll understand him, she'll believe him. Rob at least hoped so. Afterwards, he decided to find information about Paul. Jenna had told him briefly about him. I would have liked more. In social networks, Rob found his page, looked at it, remembered the picture. We'll have to figure out how to reason with the pissed-off farmer. The night passed quietly. In the morning, Rob hurried home to avoid meeting Jenna, and just a couple days later, there was an unexpected meeting. Rob was at an appointment at the clinic when a large elderly man literally burst into his office. "Doctor, save me." "I must be dying," with a pleading voice, he muttered and immediately started tearing off his shirt. So the sick man, "Don't panic. First of all, explain what you have happened." The elderly nurse, Kate, spoke sternly instead of the doctor. "I have a huge tumor and it hurts," complained the patient. "Rob, take a look," asked the nurse, and looked surprised at the doctor, who was staring at the patient from America. Rob could not believe his eyes. It was the same Peter, the poisoner and poisoner from Jenna's life. So he's sick. "Yeah, sure, I'll take a look." Rob nodded. "Show me." On Peter's back was a huge lump the size of a chicken egg, red-blue in color. Rob realized at a glance. It was a simple one from Rob that could be opened and removed immediately in the dressing room. Complicated case. Slowly, he said sleepily, ignoring the surprised look from Nurse Kate. Prepare the instruments. Let's go remove it. Right there, sick. What if it's cancer? What if I die after your manipulation? You're not gonna die, at least not anytime soon, if of course you live in accord with your conscience. I've seen these formations. They occur in people who've done a lot of evil. Admit it. Have you ever done anything bad to anyone? I have. I can see it in your eyes. Now it's materializing in the form of these abscesses. Now both the nurse and the patient were looking at him in amazement. Rob was on a roll. My grandmother was a hereditary witch doctor, and she used to tell me about such things. Anger builds up in a person, and then it comes out. Of course, I'll delete everything. Only a new one will appear. If you continue to do nasty things, he'll do them. Rob spoke clearly and confidently, looking into the eyes of the patient, as if hypnotizing him. And he was like a rabbit in front of a boa constrictor. I won't. Almost crying, Peter replied. Doctor, help me. I can't take it anymore. I admit I've sinned sometimes. I won't do it again. Kate was already putting away her tools, a little unsure of what was going on. Maybe Rob had gotten a little too worked up. She decided not to get involved just yet and just do her job. Rob opened up the abscess pretty quickly, did what he needed to do. And as the nurse was dressing it, whispered in the patient's ear, "Believe it or not, I have a gift. I can sometimes see what's going to happen to a person. I got it from my grandmother." Well, if you hurt a young woman, you're going to get bumps like this all the time. I don't know what kind of woman she is, but I see that she's pregnant and will give birth soon. When Peter heard that, he howled. Understood, doctor, I won't. After leaving the office, he thanked the doctor profusely for both the work and the warning. Kate was still under the impression of what had happened. Rob, what was that? Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. What grandmother? What sores? What kind of nonsense were you talking about? Nonsense indeed, Rob smiled. I made it all up, and it turned out to be plausible. It's just that this man is really hurting a friend of mine, and I've been trying to figure out how to get him to back off. And then he came to me. It was a sin not to take advantage of such an opportunity. Yes, you buried your talent for acting, the nurse laughed. Even I, the old fool, believed it. Kate, you're far from stupid and you're a very good professional. I also know that you are very decent. Please don't tell anyone about this case. Or what if the patient reaches the point of disbelief in Rob's predictions? Winked slyly at the nurse. Absolutely not. I'm sure, Kate. It's all for a good cause. That's why I'm a grave. That's how Rob solved the problem with Peter. He really stopped bothering Jenna. And after reading online, he even found confirmation of the doctor's words. There really is such a thing. You do evil, and it shows up on you. He'd already promised not to hurt Jenna. Debt forgiven. He was just trying to do a little mischief. See how that worked out. Well, he didn't need Jenna. Rob's parents began to suspect that their son was having an affair with a girl. He was often away, brooding. One day, his father asked him directly when his son would introduce his mother to his chosen one. Rob only smiled in response. If parents knew how complicated everything was. It's been almost a month now. How he has been communicating with Jenna. They are just friends and still hasn't said who he really is. And the further it gets, the harder it's proving to be. That November morning, Rob was resting after a night on duty. Outside the window, it was snowing mixed with rain, slushy, cold outside, but at home it was warm with a warm plaid blanket. Rob was immersing himself in sweet rhyme, as suddenly he was literally pulled from the embrace of morphine. The phone rang. It was Jenna. Rob, I'm sorry to bother you, but I don't know what to do. He heard her voice in the receiver. Jenna spoke quickly, with a kind of tear in her voice. Rob realized she was in labor. Rob, the ambulance says it can't get through. The road's a muddy mess. They came, but they said they'd have to walk to the highway, and I'm in labor. And without panic, answered Rob as I got dressed. At what intervals the contractions I did not catch. A little surprised, answered Jenna. Well, 10-15 minutes there is a break. This is just the beginning. There's still time. I'll figure out what to do, and you get ready little by little. Maybe it's just a precursor. You still have 2 weeks to go, Rob said. I don't know. Jenna exclaimed pitifully. Again, I'm sorry you're stressed out. Stop apologizing. Calm down and wait. Everything's going to be fine. And Rob skipped out of the house. Mom and Dad heard the whole conversation and just looked at each other. Someone's giving birth to their son. He's in a different specialty. What's the son hiding from them? Rob was already driving his car to Moose Creek. He realized that only a crawler tractor could get through that mud. It's a couple of kilometers from Moose Creek to the trailhead. Where to find a Caterpillar tractor? Rob called Benjamin on the way and told him everything. The colleague immediately remembered that in the village, where his mother lives, he saw in one yard just such a technique. Maybe still on the move, Benjamin contacted his mother, and soon she was running to the neighbor. Yes, he had a Caterpillar tractor. When the collective farm collapsed, he was able to take it for himself. Now he used it sometimes in his work. James was farming too, like Peter at Moose Creek. But he had less material resources. But he had a Caterpillar tractor. James, without further ado, I got it. We need to get the woman in labor to the ambulance. He found out where to pick her up and got on the road. He helped Jenna into the tractor. On the way, the man prayed to God that his passenger wouldn't give birth. No, he's seen it all, and he can do a lot of things, but it's definitely not his place to deliver a baby. At that time, an ambulance was waiting on the highway. The medics even wanted to walk. What's the point where there's knee-deep mud? How can they carry the woman in labor? They had to wait. Soon Rob joined them as well. He stopped his car and got into the Jeep with his colleagues. Oh, Rob, what are you doing here? Kevin, the EMT, was surprised. For the same reason as you, I'm meeting a woman in labor. They said they were on their way. They just called. That's good. Who are her good acquaintances? Soon they saw tractor drivers coming along the road, old, running, but confidently advancing on the off-road. It's time for us to get such equipment. Igor grinned. On such roads for sure. Rob supported him. James drove up to the highway. Rob helped Jenna out of the tractor and carried her to the ambulance. Rob, why are you here? Jenna repeated. You have to be at work in case there's an accident or a fire. God forbid. What does an accident or a fire have to do with it? Kevin asked ironically. Rob, when did you join the Ministry of Emergency Situations? I thought you were still operating on people. Like operating. Jenna gasped. Soon a man in pain stared at Rob. Rob, actually a young but hopeful surgeon, again answered the ER doctor. Surgeon Jenna howled in pain. But why? Why did you tell me you were in hospital administration? Then all later Rob told her softly and took her hand. Don't worry, I'll explain everything to you. Right now you mustn't think about anything else but the baby. He looked reproachfully at his colleague, but the latter just shrugged his hands and shrugged his shoulders, saying, I'm sorry, I said something wrong. Jenna was taken to the hospital quickly, without further adventures. Rob stayed at the hospital. He couldn't be home when Jenna was in labor. His thoughts were all about her. He sat in his ward, filling out routine reports, while he imagined how she was in agony right now. And every cell in his body seemed to feel her pain. Rob had never before imagined that such a thing could happen. No, he didn't care about the paperwork. He tossed the pen aside, stood up, and walked to the maternity ward. She'd just given birth. Your acquaintances joyfully informed him by the midwife at the entrance the boy is 3,755 kilograms. 9 points. Rob, hearing this, sat up on the couch. A wave of warmth washed over him. The boy is a healthy kid. His Jenna's a mom now. Immediately a note of doubt began to storm through his mind. Who is he? Just a good acquaintance. This kid of that guy who died on his desk. And he'll always remember that, will look at the kid and remember how he couldn't help Andrew. Why did he think he'd be watching though? After all, now Jenna wouldn't have to tell everything, and she was unlikely to want to continue communicating with him. Maybe not telling everything. Yes, the surgeon was preparing Andrew for surgery, but he didn't have time to do anything. And that was the truth. How's Mom feeling? Rob lifted his head and looked at the midwife, who was standing next to him. She's fine. They've taken her to her room now, and she's probably sleeping on the poor thing. They say they took her on a caterpillar tractor. The midwife shook her head. That's quite an adventure. Maybe it's a good thing. Or maybe she gave birth faster. And she went to the ward, musing to herself about the imperfections in our lives. Rob returned to his thoughts. How would things go from here? The next day, taking advantage of his official position, Rob made his way to Jenna's room. There were 2 other women lying with her. One of them, oh, ouch, squinted and said hello to Rob first. It turned out that he had removed her toenail earlier in the year. Doctor, your hands are golden. The guy was barely sick at the time, and it healed quickly. Taking the opportunity, she said, and then, nodding to her neighbor, both slowly walked out of the room. The young mothers realized that the doctor and Jenna needed to talk. So they looked at each other expressively. Girls, I won't be long, thankfully, Rob warned them. Jenna was lying on the bed and her curly hair was rummaging across the pillow through a nightgown 2 sizes larger peeking over a skinny shoulder. Jenna realized this and bashfully covered herself with the sheet. So you really are a surgeon? She said thoughtfully, looking at Rob. Why did you lie to me? I couldn't tell the whole truth, Rob admitted. When I found out it was your husband who had died, I had a hard time in my operating room. No, it wasn't my fault he died, but I felt so sorry for you, and I wanted to do something to help you. Just sorry. At first, yeah. And then, Jenna, I realized I couldn't do it without you. I'm just your friend, and I'll stay that way if you want me to. But I need you to know that I need you, and I'll take your son. If you weren't responsible for Andrew's death, why didn't you say anything, letting him confess? Asked Jenna. Her eyes looked into his soul. At first I thought it was unnecessary to tell you, and then I thought you might blame me anyway. You loved your husband very much. I did. She agreed and closed her eyes. Rob was silent, and so was Jenna. Rob, I'm sorry, I'm tired, she finally said. Rest, he whispered. And for the first time in his life, he kissed more than just her hand, and she didn't pull her back. The next evening, Rob came again, and they had a long talk in the residence room where they were allowed to go in. Yes, Jenna was resentful of Rob for his lies, but in the little time they had known each other, she had managed to grow accustomed to him and love him, and by all his deeds and actions. Rob had proved that he was a wonderful man and would probably be a wonderful father for Sebastian. That's what she decided to name her son. Jenna did not go to Moose Creek again from the birth center. Rob took her and the baby to his home. To say that Rob's parents were very surprised, that's an understatement. He hadn't met anyone in the township, and then he brought his wife with a child. At first, my mother was distrustful of her daughter-in-law. Maybe she talked a guy's head off and wanted to shove someone else's child on their neck. But over time, Adriana's heart thawed. She realized that Jenna loves Rob, and she's a good hostess, and the father was happy to be a grandfather. Martin gladly walked with his grandson, even helped to bathe him. And the first word Sebastian said was grandfather. Jenna, of course, was very surprised, but not at all upset. So accepted her baby into this family, and they are native to them with a slide. 3 years passed. Sebastian was already in kindergarten. Rob also worked as a surgeon in the hospital, and Jenna, having entered the College of Culture in absentia, worked in the village club. Their family was simply a role model. Rob and Jenna were a beautiful couple, young, handsome lovers. Many in the district center even envied their relationship, and nothing heralded the storm. Then Mike arrived in the village. He still worked in the ministry and was even a small boss. After that story, Mike never came to visit his parents. More often they came to him. But here he decided to come himself. He heard from his father, and Rob got married. Alex, of course, recognized Rob's wife, the very girl he had told the twists of fate a few years ago with a sad look, and expressed his sympathy in the death of her first husband. And now she was Rob's wife. At first he'd been worried, thinking Rob was up to something, but then he'd realized he wasn't thinking anything like that. So he relaxed. Rob worked well with the head doctor, tried to keep his interactions to a minimum. He kept his mouth shut about this story too. Good for him. That's the smart one. Alex was happy and continued his work. It should be said that there were many ambiguous situations in his work. including the payment of labor to employees. But he got away with everything because he had good connections in the Ministry of Health. And now my son worked there too. And so in the evening after the son's arrival, they sat for a while at a delicious dinner. And then Alex and Nikolay went out on the terrace of their beautiful mansion to get some air. And somehow, while they were talking, they got to talking about Rob. And you know who his wife Alex rounded his eyes and shook his head. You won't believe it, the wife of the guy who died during the operation. But the same one. You what? Mike marveled. Why would it be love all of a sudden? I was expecting a trick at first, but now I realize it's love. Rob is such a fool raising someone else's child and is happy. He's a fool, Mike said. To hell with it, they switched to other topics. And the subject of Rob and his wife didn't seem to matter, but not to Mike. He spent a lot of time thinking about his father's words before he went to bed. So Rob is happy. Well. In the morning, he decided to see what the beauty was all about. Rob's wife had found Rob on the internet. Now they weren't friends, so they weren't interested in each other's lives. But this was different. Mike found joint photos of Rob with Jenna, saw their son. Happy, you say, Mike hissed softly, and he hatched a plan. He walked toward the club, intending to talk to Jenna and tell her something about her husband. Mike was sure that the young woman was living in ignorance that it was Rob who had operated on her husband. Jenna was surprised when the security guard informed her that an unknown man was waiting for her at the entrance. She went down. Presentable, solid, and clearly some kind of boss. She didn't know exactly who he was. Hello, he stepped forward, and I'm Mike, a classmate of Rob's. We used to work together. We need to talk. And I've been listening to you for a while, agreed Jenna tensely. She sensed a negative vibe coming from this man, a black haze hanging over him. Why don't we go to the park? Mike suggested. Jenna nodded again, and there on the bench Mike admitted that he'd been silent for a long time, but now he couldn't stay silent. He just doesn't have the right. He has to open Jenna's eyes to her husband. Your husband is a criminal, Mike blurted out. Jenna shuddered and recoiled from her interlocutor. You're saying terrible things. I'm sorry, but I don't want to listen to you. She turned to leave, but Mike grabbed her arm. Do you know that it was Rob who operated on your first husband? I know, Jenna said calmly, just like I know that Andrew died before the operation. How so? Mike grinned. His hands were shaking that day. He was hungover. I saw it all myself because I was at the stadium at the operation. I told him to be more careful. If he can't do it, it's better not to start. We could have called the Air Force. He decided that, like God, he can do anything in any condition. I don't believe you. More pale, whispered Jenna. Rob doesn't drink and never has. Until his after that story, as the grandmothers whispered, really stopped using. My dad felt sorry for him. We went to school together. Rob was struggling, but he got his degree. We came here together. My dad didn't make a fuss. The pathologist made a judgment call. That's all. And me. I couldn't work with him anymore. I went to the city, got a job there. I'm sorry to tell you all this, but you should know the kind of man you're living with. Jenna listened to Mike and couldn't move as if struck by thunder. Was Rob involved in her Andrew's death? Or is the man lying? Why would he do that? Jenna remembered Rob's acquaintance. Their first interaction. He hadn't told her he was a surgeon. Yeah, then he explained why. But if he lied the first time, why not the second? Jenna kept believing what Mike was saying. And then, without a word back to him, she turned and walked briskly to the club. Soon she jumped out of there with her purse and ran in the direction of the house. And Mike, who was sitting in the park, smiled contentedly. Now his former friend would be in big trouble. Rob will prove otherwise. May not prove who he is without him, Mike. And Jenna, hastily packing her things, without explaining anything to Rob's parents, rushed to the daycare center, and then together with her son they left for the abandoned Moose Creek. Jenna realized that it was not a solution to live in an old house with a small child, with no means of livelihood she could not. But that's okay, she needs to calm down and work things out. But to stay with Rob under the same roof she didn't want even 1 minute. Yes, the house was abandoned, but Jenna had started the same day to wash, to spruce up, to put everything in order. Along the way, she watched Sebastian sadly playing with the car in the middle of the yard behind his weeds. Better that than socializing with Rob. Too bad, except there were 3 pickings that were living out their lives in Rob's parents' yard. But what could be done? She'll leave Moose Creek, just to get her mind right for a while. Where to? Probably the city. Rob Among called at work. Adriana, drenching herself in tears, and told her that her daughter-in-law had run off with her grandson, but she didn't say where. Rob tried to call Jenna. The phone was unavailable. When he finished seeing patients, he hurried home to talk things over. On the way, Rob saw Mike. He was happily, contentedly riding in the car with his father. Rob had his first suspicions. He decided to dial a number he hadn't dialed in years. Surprisingly, a former friend answered the phone. "Mike, is that something you said to Jenna without saying too much?" Rob asked. "Rob, is that you, buddy?" Mike exclaimed happily. "Am I glad to hear from you? Good for you for calling Colia and asking you. But I saw your wife. She's cute. By the way, she was very surprised to learn that you were responsible for the death of her first husband." "Sorry, I thought she knew." Mike announced cheerfully. "What did you say?" Rob's jowls were flaring as he heard it. "What did you make up?" "It's all true. You prove it." And Mike, laughing, dropped the conversation. Back home, he couldn't recover for a long time. He'd been made to look bad, which was definitely not his fault. Jenna, it turns out, believed it. How do you prove her wrong? Martin, seeing his son's suffering, offered to talk frankly. And Rob told him everything about the details of the operation. Martin listened. He was quiet. This family should have been exposed long ago. Finally, he said, "Son, there is a plan." And Martin said that the son of his colleague is engaged in videotaping and including hidden. You can persuade him to put a camera. And then call Mike and call him for a frank conversation. Yes, such footage will not go to court, but it will make a lot of noise. And Jenna, when she finds out, will realize that she was wrong to believe in all these plots. Where to set up, where to call Mike? Michael offered an option. The same guy who was shooting in the VIP room, their most famous cafe in the village. There are no people there, and you can relax and blab extra. So they did. And then Rob called Mike and suggested we meet for a drink. "Mike, I was right. We've been friends for so many years, and then this happened. Let's make up," Rob said, calling Mike again. "You're invited to our best cafe. My treat." Rob knew Mike the freeloader was bound to bite. And so it was. The former friend came to the cafe in high spirits, in anticipation of a pleasant time at the Passage. "And the girls will be here," he joked. "Sits down, soft chair. Anything the customer wants." Nodded to and Rob. They had one drink each. Then they reminisced some more about childhood, adolescence, school. At some point it was clear that Mike had had enough to drink. Rob decided to take action. "Mike, tell me, why do you hate me?" he asked quietly. Mike froze for a second. Then he smiled. "You still don't believe in true friendship, do you? Rob, I had a different opinion of you and you of me. I knew you were a coward, but that you were sneaky and cowardly and sneaky." Suddenly Mike shrieked. "You are. Why do I hate you? You ask. Because you always thought I was nothing. At school, you were supposedly protecting me by cheating on me. And you wouldn't have gotten into college anyway if my dad hadn't helped you. You're nothing. I liked Molly first in high school, you know? I wanted to hook up with her, and she chose you. I've said all sorts of things about you, her and her alcoholic parents. And you live in a barn. How is she glued? Was she? Well, I set her up with that kid. She dumped you. She did the right thing. You and the Poppers. Okay, it doesn't matter." Trying my best to sound calm, Rob said, "Why did you tell Ira an untruth?" "That I said it was your fault. You can't prove it now. And your idiot believed that she left you. She ran away. Where's your happiness now? Burst like a soap bubble. I hate you. Serves you right. Mike, you know I had nothing to do with Andrew's death. You were responsible for the patient's death, but I kept my mouth shut all these years. Yeah, and I sent him to the afterlife. Double dose of anesthesia. So I didn't think, had a little too much to drink over the holidays. So what? My dad covered for me anyway. And you're so noble. He was silent, so now he's getting paid for his silence. Your wife, I left you. Not only that, I've also informed the press that such a doctor works. That's gonna hurt the head doctor. We have serious patrons. And you fool won't be able to clean yourself up for the rest of your life. I've had enough of you. Fuck you. And Mike staggered off towards the exit, while Rob remained seated. He'd been overwhelmed all these years. He hadn't realized how much Mike hated him and why. After all, it would seem that Mike had everything and opportunity and wealth without the most important brains. I guess that's why I hated Rob. That was a great shot. Rob wondered what to do with it. He decided to consult with Benjamin. His colleague, of course, wondered for a long time what Rob had kept silent about for so long, and then admitted that it was hard to say when there was no defense behind you. I didn't like the head doctor right away, Benjamin added. And then he suggested that we take the footage to the investigative committee. Let them sort it out, consider it a delusion of a fallen man. Let it be so. And if the case goes through, Alex will fly from his chair at the speed of sound. And I'll probably be prosecuted, Rob suggested. I don't think so. You didn't do anything. You'll tell us how it was, and that's it, Benjamin reassured. The main thing is to find your wife and show her the tape. Do you have any idea where she might be? Only Moose Creek. Nowhere else. I'm taking tomorrow off. Of course, Rob had wanted to go to Moose Creek after Jenna disappeared. But would she listen to him? Now he had his chance. Jenna was pulling weeds in the yard when she heard a car pull up in front of the house. Yes, she had assumed Rob would show up here, but she kept hoping it wouldn't happen. It hurt her to see someone who had done that to Andrew. She was living with a monster, and it was scary. Stay away from me, she shouted, thrusting forward a rag, which happened to be nearby. Hit me if you want to, quietly said Rob only at the beginning. You listen, it's not my fault. Did you believe the man who was responsible for Andrew's death? I have a tape of him talking about everything. You're lying again. The only thing I've been telling you the truth about all this time is that I didn't tell you the real reason Andrew died. Because I was afraid of losing you. But it wasn't my fault. Rob stepped forward decisively in one motion, flipped the folder out of Jenna's hands, then shoved the phone into her hands. See for yourself. Jenna at first wanted to throw the phone in her husband's face, but then something stopped her, and she watched the tape in the cafe with unblinking eyes. What does that mean? She whispered as she looked through the whole thing. Mike had come in drunk for surgery that day. His father, the chief of surgery, refused to call for an airlift. And Mike didn't calculate the right dose of anesthesia. That's why your husband's heart stopped. Yes, I knew all that. But I repeat, I kept quiet at first because I realized I couldn't do anything alone. Then I met you, and I was afraid of hurting you even more with this truth. I was there, but there was nothing I could do. That was it. Saying this, Rob walked away and sat on the porch with his head down. Jenna stood confused. She should have run away without talking to her husband. It was stupid. There was no getting Andrew back. And Rob, he had become a loving husband and father to her. Rob, you should have told me yourself, she said. Finally, I would have understood, and would have been tormented by the realization that Mike and his father were quietly healthy and in positions of power. Bitterly, he pronounced, "Why did you have to? Was it true? So that what happened wouldn't happen?" Quietly said Jenna. She walked over to Rob, sat down next to him, and rested her head on his shoulder. "Rob, I'm sorry. Take us home already. That's what I came for." He smiled and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Where is Sebastian?" "Sleeping in the house." And then there was the slap of her bare feet on the floor. "Daddy!" Sebastian shrieked with joy and threw himself on his father's neck. And everything suddenly fell into place. They were all together again because they were a family. The investigative committee took an interest in the tape. Both Mike and his father were summoned to give explanations. Rob wasn't forgotten. The pathologists called them in, although they later decided it was just the ramblings of an inebriated man. The Department of Health were quick to disavow their former friends. and soon Mike was sacked on some other grounds. The head doctor was removed for abuse of power. Even a criminal case was opened for misuse of budget funds, and afterwards they gave him 3 years with confiscation of property. The pathologist took a well-deserved retirement and went south to be with his children. In short, Rob was the only one left in the village. He was not touched in any way and continued to work. Benjamin is the head doctor now, and things seem to be getting better at the hospital. And so does Rob's family. Jenna went back. After the trial, they were given a spacious 2-bedroom apartment. Now they're going to need it, because Sebastian is going to have a baby sister soon.